All right, I think everything's going. I haven't done one of these solo for a while, but I think everything looks good. I'm getting green lights on YouTube. Looks like, you know what? Let me just make sure I didn't script something on bald. Oh, and I forgot to start the podcast feed, so that would be a problem. Let's see, is it working? Yes. Cool. Can I hear myself? I think everything's go. Yes. All right, let me get the podcast feed start. Let me get the podcast recording started, and then I'll start entertaining you folks. Allegedly. New multi-track. Lunch with Jim and A.Ron. 2018 07 06. Does he have one for lunch with Jim? Yeah, he does. My boy. Here we go. I've got still suffering from a summer cold. I'm sorry. But I am. All right, testing. All right, cool. Everything's at full capacity. I'm at two minds because when I was talking to people on Twitch yesterday, I thought that I would do like some Beaver Island show and tell, but I have I got some videos and stuff I guess I could show, but I thought maybe since Jim and I haven't really been able to exchange vacation stories, maybe next week we would talk about our vacation stories and I'd show some video. I shot a lot of video of the island, the Beaver Island, the High Island, the voyage there, and the camping experience, with the idea to take some of the stuff I learned in having to do the God of Thrones Kickstarter video and try to get kind of good at video editing, or at least like decent, so it's not as much of a chore, because I feel like I do video just enough. Like every year and a half, 2 years, I'll have to edit some video and I forget everything, like all the shortcuts and all the techniques. So I kind of thought it'd be a nice little couple-week project to put something together, like a package, and like set it to music and get some graphics and like really do some sort of storytelling thing. But if you're curious, I had a great time. We went to Beaver Island, which is the largest island in Lake Michigan, and it's part of a whole string of islands called the Beaver Island Archipelago. I'm not really quite sure how to pronounce that. And it's been one of Cess and I's ambitions to sail to all the different islands and to camp on one eventually. So this one time, last time we went to Garden Island and saw the Native American burial grounds and their spirit houses and did some hiking. That's the island. You know what? I can at least do this much. Hold on a second. Let me do a little bit of show and tell action here. So this is the United States, as you're probably familiar with. And right here in the middle is Lake Michigan. And we zoom in, and the north of Lake Michigan, way up there, almost on the border of Canada, is the Beaver Island Archipelago. And you've got High, Garden, and Hog, and it's HGH is how I remember it. And then you've got Trout, Squaw, Trout, Whiskey, and Squaw Islands. And this is Gull Island over here. I don't know if you guys can see my pointer now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, most of the built-up parts on Beaver Island are in the north half, as you can kind of see. They've got a small private airport here. There's a public airport here. All of the town and the harbor and most of the shipping and whatnot. The Beaver Island ferry takes you into this harbor called St. James Harbor. So Cecily and I sailed out of the harbor, rounded north of Beaver Island and headed west and sailed to High Island, where we made our camp right here in this bay called Great Sand Bay. And as you can see, the reason it's called Great Sand Bay is it's just beautiful. It's essentially white sand beaches with these massive dunes. You can't really tell, but these are dunes that are several hundred feet tall. And we just had a ball. It was perfect weather. The day we left, the prevailing winds were blowing from east to west, so it just literally blew us straight to the island. We stayed there for 3 days, and on the return trip, the prevailing winds shifted and then blew west to east, so we had fair winds trailing us all the way back. And it was great. It was great. I've got some video and some photos. I'll show that later, but I just wanted to, a lot of people don't even know where the hell Beaver Island is and all that, so Let's put it back to me. And I feel like maybe I should just get right to the Q&A. Take it easy on myself. Let's see here. I'm going to do forums and Twitter as best as I can. Jamie T from Atlanta. Occasionally I've seen you guys read forum comments for podcast feedback. Then other times it's like you don't want to do that. You want to only read emails. Is this for permission or privacy purposes? The reason I ask is sometimes I want to send in feedback, but the forum is so nice for immediate interaction. Okay. So what happens is, and this has been true of all of our podcasts, is like if you remember the very early days, we took feedback from Facebook and we took feedback from Twitter and we took feedback from our forums and our email address. And the reason we did that is because we didn't get a lot of feedback. Okay. So you just take it from wherever, and you know, you got the time, you got more time than you've got, you know, communication to process. So you try to encourage this community growth. So you use as much as you can. And then as shows get bigger, the fire hose opens up and you start getting, you know, 20, 30, 40, 100, 500, 1,000. Like the most email we've ever got is like 1,500 in a 3 or 4 day span during a peak Game of Thrones season. And when that starts to happen, like one by one, the other forms of social media start, because now the problem's reversed. You have way too much communication, way too many things coming at you, and not enough time to process it all. So you tend to fall back on the main one, which we consider the email. That's easier to process. It's easier to cut and paste from. The formatting's consistent. It's yada yada. Yeah. So the best chance to get read on the air is to send it in to the podcast email address. The best chance to just interact with people and get your thoughts seen is to be on the forum. And on small shows like The Expanse, Fargo's another good one. A lot of times I use edited forum feedback. I don't think anybody cares. And most of the forum stuff is not using people's real names, and I don't use people's last names anyway. So, but that's kind of my thoughts on the matter. Jamie also says, thanks for your Harmontown plug. I'm 120 episodes in. It's a happy experience like nothing else. It is fun. I really like Harmontown, and I really like seeing Dan kind of change and grow as the years have gone by, and then change the format. It's fun. That's like my probably favorite just variety entertainment podcast. Travis C. Would you eat human meat? Let's say the person donated themselves to a restaurant or something like that. Whatever makes getting the person to the plate as morally uncomplicated as possible. Is what do people taste like something you find curious? I would eat human meat in a survival situation, like a terror situation, because you know, I think the moral repugnance of eating human meat is a consequence of killing the human. If humans are dying because of natural causes in a survival situation, then for me, I don't have any moral qualms with like the integrity of the body and preserving it for some sort of resurrection or any kind of spiritual purposes. So yeah, the other I guess repugnance is that, you know, eating human meat's not a great idea because it you know, you can get a lot of diseases from it. A lot of those weird like mad cow prions are much easily transmitted within the same species, so it's not a great idea. But I guess I would just have to make sure that I don't even like the situation of like just a person died and they're like, oh, you know what I do or whatever for my body. That's I don't know. I guess if someone said that here's lab created meat, here's a lab, here's a video of us making it, and we made human meat. Does anyone want to try it? Yeah, I'd probably try it then, because there's absolutely zero human suffering going into it. But no, I probably wouldn't eat. You'd probably be safe around me. I wouldn't bite you unless we were in a survival situation and you were already dead. These questions, man. Small, simple question. What do you think about the Electoral College? Oh, yeah. Small, simple. Let's see. Shouldn't each person have their votes counted equally? You've always been incredibly insightful, and I'm very curious for your thoughts. Am I missing something here? It's total bullshit, right? I've read justifications, but it just feels fundamentally wrong to me. I think that the Electoral College was a compromise between big state. I mean, the Electoral College was kind of it is compromise between large large population states and states that don't have as large population, because in this republic form, like every state is kind of its own country, and it would be kind of bullshit if the leader of the overall country could be decided by essentially 3 states, which is what would happen if we didn't have the Electoral College. Essentially, New York, California, Texas, and to a lesser extent like Florida and Ohio would just all the large population centers, all the politicians would go there and pitch the thing, and they would vote and they would decide for everybody. And I don't know that that is fair either. Like, I guess if I was redoing the country, I would try to redraw the straight state lines like gerrymander style or anti-gerrymander style, so everyone has an equal representation. But since that doesn't happen, like, would it be cool to just force Nevada to take all of our radioactive waste because they're a large country or a large state that has very little populace to resist that? Like, those are the questions I think you got to decide. How would you keep stuff like that from happening if you didn't have an electoral college? I think the electoral college is not nearly the biggest thing that's wrong with the way we select politicians. I think the way we vote, the way we vote, where it's like winner take all, it ensures just 2-party dominance. It leads to a lot of bad results. There's a lot of alternative voting systems and ways of counting votes that are a lot better, a lot more representative. And I'm always puzzled when people like harp on the Electoral College with everything else that we have wrong with the way we elect our leadership. So, and I hate to throw something like that out of the wayside before someone says, okay, how are you going to keep small states from being bullied? Or do you care? And if you don't care, then why? Like, why is it cool to force Nevada to take nuclear waste? Why would it be cool to just dump all your trash in New Hampshire? Because what the fuck are they going to say about it, How would you protect that from happening with our existing system if you just remove the Electoral College? Man, I forgot how I forgot how much strain it puts on your voice to do solo lunches because there's nobody to take the strain away. Joshua Heater from Omaha, Nebraska. I recently listened to one of your early-ish podcasts and noticed a bit of difference in pacing, tone, etc. For example, you guys would let a joke last a little bit longer than you would now. Over the years, what sort of off-air conversations have you guys had about these sorts of things, or has your on-air banter just sort of evolved naturally? I think it's more of the latter. I can't remember I mean, we do have fairly regular conversations about, like, how we podcast and like the structure and the nuts and bolts, the procedures of it, but like the banter part, we don't really talk about that. I'm trying to think of, like, when you say let the joke run a little bit, I guess the other thing is as our podcasts kind of get longer and we kind of get more long-winded and we have a lot of feedback, then maybe there is an idea that you can't just dwell on something for ha-has, but that would be a subconscious thing. It's not something that I've ever like, oh, you know what, we're spending way too much time making jokes. We should, hustle along as soon as we can. But so, yeah, I'd say it evolved. Whatever style we've had has pretty much evolved naturally. We do put a little thought and like mechanics into, making the podcast like, I listen to at least one podcast a week just to see what kind of like bad habits I'm slipping into. So like I do that as kind of a way to self-correct some of this stuff. But yeah, I think it's time to go to Twitter to get a couple things. Let's see. AC Stars listened to Ocean's 8 podcast and laughed out loud at A.Ron and Cecily trading barbs on clothes left on the floor and not separating laundry. What habits do your significant others have that drive you crazy? I mean, the laundry is really the only thing that me and Cecily kind of like have a struggle, struggle over, because we just don't, I guess, see eye to eye on how it should be done. I know one thing that drives her nuts is when I'm watching television, I will just get up and go to the kitchen and get a drink and come back and rewind to the spot that I was at rather than just pausing. And I don't know why I do that, because it's dumb and it doesn't make any sense. But like, it's not something like I'm doing, but it's and when I do it by myself, it's not a big deal. But you can understand how like frustrating it must be to be sitting on the couch, guy walks away, comes back, and it rewinds at 45 seconds. I'm trying to do better on that, I guess. But I don't know. I'm just kind of absent-minded. Like, it honestly never occurs to me to pause the fucking thing when I just think, oh, I'm thirsty. Oh, I should go up and get a Coke. All right, I'm back. Oh, shit, I didn't know what's going on. Rewind. Like, I guess it's like Einstein walking out. Shit, I just compared myself. I unironically compared myself to Einstein. I feel like I'm really I'm teetering close to some things that are going to haunt me for the rest of my online career. I'm just not absent-minded guy. I'm not an Einstein. Let's see. Ted K. What podcasts are you listening to these days? I'm really digging Malcolm. Let me call up the old podcast feed. I'm really digging Malcolm Gladwell's Revisionist History. That's really cool. I also am really enjoying Crooked Media's Keep It. They're kind of pop culture Hollywood podcast. And I'm also really into, I've been listening to my buddy Ian Samuel, First Monday Supreme Court podcast. That's a very good podcast. And during Westworld, I listened to a lot of Westworld podcasts. I was listening to David and Joanna's. I was listening to the Recapables. There's just so much great coverage of that show that and it's a fascinating show that I felt like I was really struggling to keep on top of. So the podcast kind of helped me out a lot there. Keeping it on the Twitter for a couple here. Who is this? Naptime for Real says, I've been thinking of leaving LA for a job in Texas. What scares me is that if I leave, I will never be able to afford to come back. It's been overrun with homeless. Every spot on the sidewalk has a tent and have replaced 6 windows in cars in 2 years despite there not being a single item in my car. It's expensive and I'm struggling. If I sell my place and move to Texas, I'm 8% better on taxes day one, and from the sale of my house in LA, I won't need a mortgage in Texas. The cost of living is also substantially cheaper, but it also feels like admitting something about politics are a failure. Plus, we waited a long time for legal weed. You guys have moved from very different places in the last several years. How do you... Oh, why isn't it... Okay, yeah. How do you guys know when it's the right choice, and how do you manage to change? Typically, I don't even move when I'm forced to. Like, I think I do think that I had in mind to move away from the Midwest at one point, because the Midwest, essentially what it's got going for, you know, Lake Michigan aside, in the middle of Indiana, in the middle of Ohio, really the only thing you get going for is the cost of living. Like, it's hot as balls in the summer, it's cold as shit in the winter. There's not a lot of great geography. I mean, there's rolling hills and there's nice streams and rivers. And in the fall it's gorgeous, but there's no mountains, there's no ocean, there's no vast deserts, there's no, you know, Monument Valley. We got some cool caves. Mammoth Cave is only like an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So if you like spelunking, that's pretty cool. But you know, I moved from Indianapolis to Cincinnati because my ex-wife moved here and she had my son, and I felt like, you know, I was in a position to move, and I felt like that's what I needed to do to be a good dad for my son. So I've never had like an economically motivated move, and it sounds like that's what's going on. That like you just it sounds like it's really tough to be poor in LA. Or be on the borderline in LA, and if you move to some other part in the country, it'd be easier. You know, I don't like. There's other places besides Texas. It sounds like that maybe the reason you're going for Texas is because there's not a state income tax. You could check in Florida. Like there's always like the Midwest if you're looking for, you know, easier economic times. There's even some progressive Midwestern states that you can look into. But as far as if you know, if it's the right choice and how do you manage to change, it's like that old adage that like you finally make a change when the pain of staying the same is worse than the fear of the change. So I think that's probably going to apply to you. And how do you manage it? I don't feel like I've managed this move very well, because I've been here 5 years and I still only have essentially 2 adult friends, Jim and Cecily. I still have several of my friends back in Indianapolis, but I don't see them as much. And I feel like that's the one thing I wish I'd done differently. I wish I'd spent more time. I don't know where I'd gotten that time because I was trying to get this business off the ground, and but spend more time like trying to get to know people. And I think if you're moving from like LA to Texas, that's going to be even more important because there's going to be some culture change and culture shock. But yeah, I mean, we've got a ton of people to live in Texas on the forums, forums.baldmove.com, if you want to get in there and ask some questions, because there's some really cool places in Texas too. What's the Austin is like, always mentioned as being a really cool town. I think San Antonio is a pretty cool town. So yeah, let's see. I'm gonna do one more Twitter and I'll get back to forums. Let's see. Roy wants to know, are you guys going to read the books that the HBO series Sharp Objects is based on? No. Nope. Might read it afterwards if I really dig it though. Back to the forums for a minute. Take a couple questions from there. Let's see, where was I at? Okay, here we go. Gunat. I swear that since the net neutrality repeal, my internet has been a lot slower in my house Wi-Fi and the data and on data out and about. Consciously, I don't think I've been looking for it, but I'm not sure if I experienced a lot of slowness prior. But now, something I can't point to and blame. Okay, I think your thing is like, is this your imagination? I never really thought of this, but not at the office so much, but I've noticed that my fiber at home is much more slow than it used to be. And one of the reasons we switched to a different company here at work is because their speeds were degrading as well, and I had the same ISP. So it's possible now that nobody's, keeping tabs on it, that they are starting to do some throttling or whatnot. But I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see how the net neutrality stuff works out as we go forward. Aki, since you were doing a solo lunch, are you doing it at the office or are you doing it at home? I'm doing it at the office. If you're doing it at the office, is there anything you do differently at the office while Jim isn't there? Say sit in his chair, do the podcast, change the placement of stuff on his desk? Nah. Jim tends to be surly in the mornings, and I would not, and he doesn't. He's not an admirer of practical jokes. I don't think I would want to try to fuck with his workstation on his first day back after vacation. I think that would be, knowing him as I do, I think that would be a high risk, low reward play. And I don't really I like my side of the desk. It's set up the way I like it. I like my side of the couch. It's set up the way I like it. I'm used to that viewing angle. It's like, essentially, when I'm here alone, it's exactly how I am with him here, except for I listen to more music. I listen to my podcast out loud. Yeah. Warp Fox from Nashville. Another drink break. A lunch or two ago, you guys were talking about motivation and doing the right thing for yourself. Jim mentioned having to force himself into situations where he has no choice but to make good decisions. But that, of course, isn't always applicable. I'm in a job that I want to move on from, and I've been trying to learn a new skill, programming, so that I can transition into an area that actually interests me. I've access to all the documentation and tutorials I could ever want, but I have a hard time actually staying motivated to keep learning. My discontent with my current job, even at peak stress, is not enough to motivate me to continue to learn programming. In fact, the opposite is true. When I've spent all day stressed out at work, the last thing I want to do is to come home and make my brain focus on interface implementations or maintaining persistence between application layers. I'd rather play video games or watch TV movies to unwind. I enjoy programming, but recently it's very hard for me to get myself into the frame of mind to do it every day. I have quote-unquote programming sessions with a developer friend of mine every Thursday evening where we dive in and do some collaborative coding, but I'm not getting anything done between Thursdays. Do you have any advice into how I can change my thinking or maybe hack into my motivational dopamine loop? Anything so that I can actually buckle down and learn this stuff properly? That's tough, because when I'm thinking back, it seems like every single time I've had to make a big change professionally or whatnot, I've been in a transition period of my life. Like in my early 20s, I switched from just doing bullshit, like working at Walmart and FedEx and, you know, just a job to trying to get a career. And I did that by getting into programming, something I was always interested in as a youth, and I had some training through vocational school and high school. And my ex-wife had I think we both had part-time jobs because we were doing the witness thing when we were preaching in our free time. But I was just able to kind of like throw myself into it and just, you know, spend large chunks of time each day learning new things and teaching myself things and finding projects that I was interested in. And you know, it was just, I was passionate about it, and I was young. I didn't have any kids to distract me. And then the second time I reinvented myself when we started doing this podcast thing full time, or not even full time, when we just started doing the podcast. Like, I was recently divorced. I only saw my kid half the time. I had oceans of free time to fill because I had all that cult shit that I wasn't doing anymore. So that was my desk fan just falling over. So I had I had time to turn my hobbies into something more. You are in a tougher spot because, you know, you've got your wife and daughter. So like, what advice would I give you? I mean, it's cool that you've got a appointment with another person, because that's like the gym thing. Like, you're obligating yourself, so you show up. I wonder if you could maybe carve out like a late, like some late Saturday nights, like after the family goes to bed, if you could spend another couple hours to, like, you know, research or practice something that would then come into play on the Thursday programming session. Because I think that you'd be twice as effective, because every couple days you're going to be doing a little bit of stuff. And also, like, I've heard it said that it's better to get like 30 minutes every day than like 6 hours in one session a week. So if that's something that you could work out to where, you know, you just maybe you get up earlier, because that's another thing I found when I'm trying to do something different, like when I'm trying to improve my health, or I'm trying to learn something like a big change in routine. Like, I'll get up an hour early and spend that time programming, or I'll stay up an hour late and you can spend that time programming. But honestly, you do, like, the only thing you control is your own effort and your own work. You know, to successfully translate this or transition in this career, you're going to need a little bit of luck. You can mitigate that with having some contacts in you know, if you have some friends that are in a place where you want to be that can help you along. But the only thing you can control is your own work and the quality of it and how much time you put into it. And unfortunately, that's the shit that has to come within. And like we said last week, I mean, I don't know. Are you getting down on yourself? Because one thing I've learned recently is I feel like that the key to my procrastination is to be a little bit kinder on myself, and to, you know, not get in that shame cycle where, like, oh, you know, I'm not doing the thing I need to do to be successful, and I'm just sitting here and I'm too tired from work and I'm being a couch potato and I'm pathetic. And I don't know if that's running through your head, but maybe you could try to stop that. You know, if you think it's pathological, it's something you could talk to a therapist about, because I'm not a mental health expert or a life coach. But you know, it's going to be finding those periods of time. And the other thing is, like, are you thinking about it? Because I find a lot of times is, even when I'm not actively doing it, I'm thinking about those things. And I think that when you finally sit down and do it, if you're still thinking about stuff in the shower, in the commute drive, when you're going to sleep, that stuff all bakes in and is present when you actually sit down and do the work. Hopefully there is something helpful in there. Hatorian from Dagobah, sent you a message on this, but not sure what you're. Oh, okay, yeah. So you're wanting to do a 4th annual Bald Move Fantasy Football League. Let me talk to Jim about it, because I don't know why that would be a problem, but, you know, I guess the only reason it would be a problem is if we don't have the queue opened, because I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's something we're going to do. If we, I don't think it's something we do unless we have the queue open before football season, because I think people would think that was bullshit, that you know, we're giving away 3 commissions to a league and we're not even letting anybody else participate in it. So hopefully we can get that sorted out. Let's see. Also, Jamie has some really solid advice on this, Tyler, if you want to check that out. Going back to the procrastination or just job switching stuff. MFT Westworld at the end of last season, the showrunner said they looked at season 1 as a prologue to their big picture story. If so, then what the hell was season 2? It feels like the story told it should have been done in 2 episodes and moved on to the big picture story they want to tell. Do you think after success of season 1, the showrunners were arrogant enough to give us fillers for an entire season as a way to just prolong the series? I don't know why they would prolong a series, because I don't feel like HBO rewards you for that. I don't think it's arrogance. I think they just made a mistake, or they're telling a story that a lot of the people that were invested in season 1 are not interested in hearing. We'll have to, I mean, honestly, that's going to be settled in season 3. But I do think that maybe if they could do it over again, they'd make season 1 12 episodes and wrap up with the robots escaping the park. And then you could just go, you know, it's essentially, because I agree. I think there's about 3 hours of important storytelling that needed to happen, and everything else was kind of like fluff, which was some enjoyable fluff. But yeah, I don't think it's arrogance or malice. I think it's more just, you think like, man, we got like this really great material, and we don't want to yada yada through it. So let's sit down and see, like, okay, let's do this Kiksuya episode. That's good. And okay, let's do this Jim Delos episode. That's good. And okay, we got 3 more episodes. Let's just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be in that writer's room. And tell that like kind of opaque story and why they thought that was going to work out. I don't know. Like, that would be fascinating if they ever have a behind the scenes thing about that. But I just don't think I also don't think they've done anything wrong either. It seems like they're comfortable with like potentially losing half their audience and just telling the story they don't want to tell. Michelle, have you ever seen something that moved you so much that you couldn't help it to tear up a bit? Yeah. I'm kind of a softie, especially compared to Jim. Like, you know, something really majestic, like mountains and sunsets, like every once in a while, I remember when I was riding my motorcycle through the Smoky Mountains, and I was on the Cherhola Skyway, and there was a couple of like these switchbacks on the mountainside, and then I came around this last curve, and there was like a scenic pullover, and my dad and I had gotten up super early because those roads kind of get crowded, especially in peak season, and it can get a little unsafe with people, you know, driving and riding too fast. So we got up just before the sun was up, and the sun was beginning to rise, and Smoky Mountains are thus named because they're shrouded in smoke and fog. And I just pulled over, and my dad was about a minute up the road, and I took my helmet off, and I just saw like the sun rising over these Smoky Mountains, and I got a little choked up just because, shit, sometimes life is beautiful. It's like so beautiful it hurts. I had some of those feelings like when I was up in Beaver Island, like look, like when we landed on the west shore of High Island, we saw one human footprint the whole time, and we hiked probably half of that shore and the dunes, and it's just like incredible to think that, you know, this is how like the whole world used to look before we started putting buildings. I don't know, like that stuff, like that kind of like when you can kind of get in touch with the insignificance and smallness of your own life and compared to the vastness of the world, which is in itself insignificant compared to the vastness of anything else you want to compare it to. That's the stuff that kind of like gets me. Let's see. Darwin Fishy, when you and Cecily play Carcassonne, do you use the river expansion, and do you play using abbots and farmers? We don't play Carcassonne with any expansions. I couldn't even tell you what the expansions did. There was an Amazon sale, I think, last winter that I almost pulled the trigger to buy like a set that had the whole thing, but then I don't know, like it's really cool that you can kind of take Carcassonne anywhere you want with like you can just take it in a sock, you know, throw all the tiles in there and go. And I don't know if you get the expansions, I don't know what all that changes, but yeah. But it is like we haven't played Carcassonne in several years. Like we moved on to Agricola, and that's like if we're playing like a 2-player game, it's probably that instead of Carcassonne. Although I do think that's a great couples game and a great starter game. Gonna have to do some personal maintenance here. Give me a second. You know, I should be marking these things on the podcast so at least people don't have to hear me blowing my nose and stuff. Okay, I'm back. Let's see. Anubis 21. Any interest in seeing the Mr. Rogers documentary? Won't You Be My Neighbor? Love Mr. Rogers as a kid, and I hear it's pretty awesome. Yeah, Cecily and I that's playing at the Art House Theater, like 4 blocks from us, and we were going to walk down and see it, and then I got waylaid by this cold. That was like, because we had a day or two after we got back from Beaver Island before we had to go back to work. I'm thinking about maybe taking my kid to see it because I hear it's really good, like life-changing good. And Mr. Rogers is a real badass. So, yeah, I definitely want to see that. Might even talk about it if it's good enough. Maddie W from Midstate New York. Imagining you're completely capable of doing the job as the characters do. Would you rather go on an Indiana Jones adventure around the world, jungles, Middle East, Zeppelins, Nazis, or be a Benjamin Gates adventurer around the United States, decoding colonial secrets, angry henchmen running after you, stealing an American artifact for the greater good? Are you seriously asking an aging Gen Xer if he'd rather be Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones or Nicolas Cage as Benjamin Gates? Like, when Indiana Jones punches a Nazi, a bit like in the soundtrack, they literally had a big burly dude with a baseball bat beating a pile of old leather jackets, just so you know that like when he's punching that Nazi, their face is getting caved in because just from the strength of his Nazi punching fists. Yeah, I would be Indiana Jones 100 times over Nick Cage and National Treasure. That is not a contest for me. King Cobra. Do you track the metrics of podcasts after shows finish? For instance, with a show like Mr. Robot or Westworld, I know there's a few members avoiding the cast and discussion so as not to get caught up in theorizing. Do you notice any upticks in the cast of shows for after a season has completed? I've always wondered if there's a kind of dent made by people like that where they come back and listen after. The only times we've seen our podcasts have fatter tails are like Netflix stuff, where it's, you know, Netflix just dumps this thing out and everybody kind of listens to it and watches it on their own time. They have noticeably fatter tails in the podcast that, you know, episode comes out, you talk about it for a week, new episode comes out, you talk about it for a week, and like all the other episodes are kind of sort of deprecated. You know, there's definitely diehards that go back and listen to the back catalog, but like I wouldn't say that there's enough of the Westworld folks. Plus, if I was a Westworld folk that got to the end of season 2 without listening to a podcast, like how many of those would go back and actually listen to all the podcasts? Because, you know, I don't think the story was that confusing that you needed more than like an Alt Shift X video to explain it to you, or you can read a single article, like slogging through 20 hours of probably redundant theory and speculation. I don't know. I don't know if anybody's done that. I know a lot of people are planning on it, but I just think those people just are probably not going to listen to the podcast. And I saw your question, so I looked it up, and I couldn't, you know, with Westworld gets about 45,000-ish listeners, which is quite a step off from last year, even adjusting for the stats tracking error that Libsyn was having. So, but even then, let's say 1,000 people which I think would be a lot, were not listening to the podcast. Like, that's such a small bump that I don't think I could detect it. No, I don't. But we do that kind of now. So like I said, the Netflix stuff, like that was, we covered Netflix shows like 6 different ways, and we measured it each time, and we tried to figure out what was the best way. And I think, you know, the best way is to just do the marathon. The second best way is to do like 3 or 4 shows a week and get it all out in like 2 or 3 weeks. And the worst way to do it by far is to do 1 episode a week or even 2 episodes a week, because people are done with this Netflix shit in 2 or 3 weeks and the conversation moves on. Let's see. Freddie, is anyone else more excited about the solo Breaking Bad video we'll inevitably get? Yeah, I can't wait to see what he does with some of the shit I was saying about Einstein. That's going to be embarrassing. Hey, let's take a drink and switch over to Twitter. Let's see. What are we doing here? Okay, yeah, I can help you out with this, Theodore. For the 7/6 installment, please do me a favor. Would you please shame people who don't flush public toilets after they take a shit? Monsters. I would do it myself, but I have no far-reaching platform. Yeah, man, you take a shit in a public restroom, flush it. Flush it. If you make a mess, go fucking tell the attendant. I mean, I'll make that announcement. I guarantee the people who are doing that don't give any more shits than they left in the bowl. Like it's some kind of statement they're making about society, or I don't know what, but it's shameful, and I would hope that there aren't any Bald Move listeners that fucking wreck a public bathroom and just roll out of that casual like a dude that blew up a building in a movie. Just don't look back, keep walking. I mean, that's yeah, don't do that. I'm on Theodore's side. BJW, Fortnite 2 million view rocket. Did you see it? Is this the future? Where is the advertising on this? Where does this go next? And with what and what is with the cracks in the sky? I mean, yeah, these nobody is making Epic put a storyline into their fucking battle royale, arena shooter, right? They're doing it just because it's fun, and they're just killing it. They're just fucking crushing it. As far as where it goes next, the best theory I heard is that where these cracks are stealing the signage from the named locations, that these are indicating that these locations are going to be like rebranded as like medieval, Retail Row will be rebranded as like a medieval style. Like think of a town in Skyrim with shops in it. Like there'll be cobblestone streets and there'll be blacksmiths and shit like that. Like it'll be historical analogs to the location. It won't change the strategic or tactical value of the map. We'll just give it like a fresh facelift. That's the best idea I've seen so far. But I don't know. We got another 6 days to try to decode mysteries, and that is it. Every 2 o'clock that the cracks do something weird. Because I was away when that stuff was going down, and I still don't feel like I've kept up on the theory crafting, but they're doing a hell of a job. All right, this is the last one from Twitter, and I can concentrate on the forums. Ryan B. Tarantino's next movie is about 60s Hollywood with the Manson family murders involved. James Marsden and Timothy Olyphant are cast in unnamed roles. One of them were to play Manson. Which would you like to which would you like to see? Probably Timothy Olyphant, right? I think he's got. Although James Marsden as Bad Teddy was pretty bad. I feel like Timothy O has the better dark streak in him. Like there's a really vicious streak that he can, and a vicious gear, even when he's playing heroes like Bullock or Raylan Givens. Like there's a vicious streak that he's got that, like, I feel I would have said before the season of Westworld that I don't think Marsden possesses. Marsden. So yeah, I guess I would see Timothy Olyphant as a Charlie Manson character more than any other. Okay, let's see. Aussie Greg from Australia, as you would imagine. Any plans to cover Better Call Saul season 4? Haven't heard you guys mention it yet. Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, you can pretty much guarantee any show that we like and that we've done before, we will continue coverage unless something crazy happens. Like if I can't like if Game of Thrones, The Expanse, and like what else? Fargo and Better Call Saul. But even then we'd probably drop. I mean, we drop Fargo because I think Jim. I don't know which one I would drop. That'd be a really tough choice. Probably Fargo because it's by far the smallest show, but god damn it, so much fun, and Holly was killing it. I just finished Legion last weekend. What a great season of television. It kills me that Jim didn't really love it in the first season because like at this point Better Call Saul rarely shows me something I've never seen before, although it does happen, and it's still a pretty gutsy show. Like what they did at the climax of last season was pretty gut wrenching. But Jesus, Legion was blowing my mind on a week by week basis. I'm gonna see if I can weasel my way back onto that podcast next year with Jason. I also like to get Jason to do like a wrap up podcast with me because I got a lot of stuff to talk about it. But yeah, we'll definitely cover Better Call Saul. Another drink. All right. Fern from NYC. You and I have talked in the past about anxiety, especially around work. As I'm dealing with high anxiety this week at work with deadlines coming up, I was curious, when did you deal with your worst case of anxiety at work? Was it back in your IT days or at Bald Move? And what was it? So yeah, I don't think I've had any anxiety. I mean, I've been nervous and worried about stuff with bald move, but I've never had like anxiety about it. The most anxious I ever got at work, I think I've told this story, but I had like a 4 day, I think, weekend coming up, and I was working like 65, 70-hour weeks at this consulting joint, and it was on a project that they brought this team on to architect it, and it was shit. And then they brought in another team to fix the mistakes of that, and it was shit. And then I was the third. I was on the third team that was completely brought in fresh to try to fix this now 2 layers of shitty code. And the client, as you can imagine, the clients that were waiting for this new version to come out were fucking just on DEFCON, however, whatever the highest level. I can't remember if it's DEFCON 5 or DEFCON 1 is the highest level. But they're about to go nuclear, and the bosses were upset. All the employees hated each other. Every time you talk to a client, it was a fucking shit show. And there was just like, even working as much as we were working, like the to-do list was a mile long, and like I kept on clinging to the idea of this 4 day weekend. Is like, if I can make it to 4 day weekend, I'll be fine. If I can make it to the 4 day weekend, I'll be fine. And the night before I had to go back to work, I had the first ever in my life. I was about 25. I had a fucking full-on panic attack. Like, couldn't catch my breath, cold sweats, just this intense fear of impending doom and dread. And that was the first time I actually went to see a therapist. And she got me some medicine to kind of smooth that out, that I stayed on for about 6 months until the worst of that was over. And the project eventually ended, and I was able to move on to something else. But, I mean, I will say that if you've never been to a therapist and you have the means to do so, and you're having panic attacks, you should definitely see one to see what they think about it, because it could be a clinical situation that you need some chemical help with, or at least talk to your family doctor, because a lot of times, like, a therapist can't prescribe medication unless you're seeing like a psychiatrist or something. But like, when I saw my therapist, they're like, go to your family doctor and tell them tell them the symptoms you're having and see what they say. And the doctors actually want to put me on the medicine. So, you know, and there's all kinds of, there's stuff you can take on long term to kind of chill you out. There's stuff you can take like when you're feeling acute panic attacks hitting. Because, you know, at the end of the day, I'm not a mental health professional, and I would hate to give you some like glib advice, and you continue to suffer needlessly, you know. So like, if you haven't explored that, and again, you've got the wherewithal, and in this country it sucks because, as I well know, it's tough to even find a doctor, find a therapist, let alone one that takes your insurance if you have insurance. But I would check that. And yeah, I don't, because ultimately I got some help with it, and 6 months to a year later I was transferred to a different position, and it was a lot less stressful. So hopefully something like that will happen to you, man, because it's a miserable way to live, being that full of anxiety. It's a hellish way to live. Corey from New Scotland, who would win in a fight, caveman or astronauts? Huh. Are the astronauts in space? Because they can just drop shit on the cavemen. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Are they naked in the Serengeti and they're just branches? Well, my money would be on the cavemen. On almost any other situation, I guess I would bet on the astronauts, because almost every astronaut not only has military experience, but they're also like PhDs, sometimes multiple PhDs. So they're smart and they have military training. So, you know, fuck your caveman with his with his stone axe and his spear. Let's see. Noel from Dallas. My best friend has a son born about 2 months ago. We were discussing different situations or topics that he will face in the future. As a father, what are some of the topics you will find most difficult to discuss with Jack as he grows into a young man? I don't know. I guess a lot of things we've already, because Jack's pretty precocious and he pays attention to the news, and you know, we've already talked about death, thermonuclear war, poverty, homelessness, disease, like a lot. So I guess the other things, like, is, you know, what happens when your friends reject you or you have trouble making friends, what happens when someone breaks your heart. Those are going to be the ones that I guess I'm least looking forward to, because that just sucks. It sucks. It sucks to see someone's innocence progressively taken from them. But that's how you have a functional, healthy adult, right? As a parent, you eventually have to accept the fact that your kids are going to go out there and get knocked around and bruised up. And hopefully you've given them the resilience and the support they need to get through it with a healthy sense of attachment and esteem and all that kind of stuff. But I guess that's the stuff that I, you know, that's just tough. Like, relationships are very tough. High school is very tough. Like, I've been preaching this since, like, you know, he was in school. Like, look, you know, sometimes things are going to get really intense and you're going to feel like this is the most important thing in the world, but you got to realize that most people get through high school and then never, ever, ever see any of these people again. They are they literally are just something that you have to, this whole experience, this whole institutionalized experience is something you have to get through and get as much value as you can, and then move on with your life. Go on to higher education, go into the job market, and not have to worry about those type of situations ever again. But it's tough because, again, you know, when you're 14, 15, 16 years old and that's all your life has been, like, this shit just feels like, you know, when you get like bullied at school, or when things aren't going right in school, or when your first girlfriend breaks up with you, like, it just feels like shit. This is how my life is starting out, and it sucks. And like, this is like, you know, you're used to kind of like those patterns in movies and stuff. Like, oh my God, am I so? It feels so much more important than it actually is. But how do you convince a kid that? I fucking don't know. I don't know. But Jack's smart, funny, and weird, just like I am. And I had a really rough time in school. And I feel like he's probably going to have a really rough time too. But what are you going to do? Let's see. I'm Maddie. I'm going to be watching both of the last 2 episodes of The Expanse later. I've struggled to get into the season, but refuse to give up. For a person that's a little lost with it, what can you say to help me? Dude, I don't know, because I think this is season 3 of The Expanse was the best science fiction show I've ever seen on television. So if you're not digging it, I think maybe it's just not for you. And there's no shame in not liking something that everybody else likes. So I will say that I've gone back and started watching season 1 of The Expanse that I thought was a little bit more uneven, and I'm having a ball, because it turns out that what was really going on is 2 things. One, Jim kind of like made me watch The Expanse. And I had a bad experience with Battlestar Galactica, as everyone knows, and Sci-Fi Channel in general. So, you know, I was kind of like watching the first few episodes with, like, I was on my phone and I was distracted by stuff going on in my house, and I don't think I was really close watching. In this show, it'd be like background watching the first 4 episodes of The Wire or Game of Thrones, right? Like, there's just, this is a very intense show about world building and political intrigue, with stuff that it's not immediately obvious what's going on, and there's a lot of subtle storytelling. And if you miss all that, it like compounds. And I think it was just the spectacularness of the 4th episode and that like space combat, and like I felt like there was a real like sense of urgency in episodes 4, 5, 6, 7 that kind of like reinvested me. And they also, I noticed as I was watching, like some of those previously ons in like episode 4, 5 or 6 are like 2.5 minutes long. And thank God for them, because it's like, oh right, when this guy said that was important, or when this girl did this, that's. So maybe go back and watch the earlier seasons and see if some things start clicking, because honestly, the pleasure of The Expanse is just watching these really well-developed characters just play. And like with Holden, I didn't understand, like, until I read this tweet by one of the showrunners where it's like, they wrote Holden as a way to illustrate what a pain in the ass, like, a paladin type character can be in like you know, any given situation. Like, just what a person that just won't let things slide, and like how kind of like aggressively unlikable that finely tuned the moral compass can be. And like once I read that, it's like, oh, he wasn't the character wasn't annoying and the actor wasn't bad. I just didn't understand where they're going with that, you know. And like I didn't understand Miller and Julie's relationship in the first 2 seasons, and now going back and watching it, I'm like, oh, this all makes, it's still pathetic and sad, but it makes sense, you know. So I guess like maybe try watching some of the earlier episodes, but there again, like if you're not digging it, man, just there's too much good television out there to spin your wheels on good television that you don't like, you know? Secondly, I've been a little sick at the moment. I have a few ideas as to why, but any general advice on health? I do believe you live in a country with socialized medicine, so I would go see a doctor because I have zero qualifications to give anyone health advice, unfortunately, or fortunately. Let's see. Scroll. Looks like Hattorian's got some. He's being your WebMD here though. Let's see. Let's scroll on down. B. Horton, what are your ideas on the future of Bald Move on Twitch? Just finished watching your Fortnite extravaganza yesterday, and it was a blast. Well, I'm glad you guys had a good time watching it. I would like, I fully intended in season 4 to like play several times a week and record it and like watch it and try to get better. And it's weird because the first day I played, I won a game, which was going to be the crowning achievement of season 4. And then I just had a slew of personal issues come up. My son was having some difficulty in school, and then my granddad died, and then Cecily's grandmother took very ill. And then her mom went through this really messy divorce. It was just a really tough time for our family, and I found that I didn't play nearly as much as I wanted to, and it wasn't nearly as much of a feature. Simultaneously, I feel like that we are not getting a lot of response to the gameplay. Like, you know, like I mentioned, like if you advertise with The Expanse and with Westworld, we tried to do like 2 months of consistent advertising on the housekeeping section, and we got like, you know, if you get 50, 60,000 people, and you go back to like Walking Dead, there's another, you know, 30, 40, 50,000 people, and you get like an average audience of like 40. That tells me that like there's very little interest in our audience for Twitch gameplay stuff. So I think what we're going to do is, I mean, the grail for me would be something that me and Jim get in that's kind of like co-op competitive. Like, I think if we did duos on Fortnite, if we did duos on Rocket League, if we did like if Sea of Thieves wasn't kind of like a mess, if we'd gotten really big into that might have built an audience. But I don't think there's an audience for doing the kind of like gameplay stuff we do like offline on Twitch. I don't think that's compelling for people. So we're also going to try to experiment some live watches and some IRL type content, some behind the scenes type content. I just don't know. I don't know, because we're just experimenting with it. It's a new platform. I knew we wanted to use it for that Groundhog's Day promotion, charity thing. And then we've just kind of been playing with it. And the last 2 weeks we've been off because I've been on vacation and Jim's on vacation. So I don't know. It's still a work in progress. JTMY92 for Independence, Missouri. Have you guys watched this season of Handmaids? My God, that show is hard to watch sometimes. Cecily and I watched the first 3 episodes, and Cecily just it's really hard. It was hard for me to watch. I can't imagine what it's like to be a woman to watch that show. Like it's just really grueling in a relentless kind of oppressive way. And as I mentioned, our family's been going through a lot of issues, and those things are all kind of smooth over and getting better. But I don't think either one of us had the psychological bandwidth to put up with that shit. Like, I don't know that I could have, if The Leftovers had come out the late winter of this year, I think I would have hated it, because I just was too raw emotionally to deal with that kind of real, like, heavy grief, injustice, despair kind of stuff. And I hear it's amazing, and I definitely want to see it. That was supposed to be me and Cecily's kind of like stepping into serious television criticism, like getting away from the Banshees and the fucking American Horror Stories of the world and doing something together that's actually worth doing. And we just shit the bed because we just both were like wrung out, and like every night we had free, it's like, do you want to watch The Handmaid's Tale, or do you want to watch this other XYZ stuff we're doing? So but I definitely want to watch it before the Baldies, because I suspect it's going to be really good, and it's probably valuable. Adsky, happy Friday, A.Ron. Listening to yourself and Jim over the past year has challenged and informed some of my politics and opinions, and I want to thank you for that. You're welcome. I'm just passing it on, man. You in particular have a great way of expressing your thoughts and opinions on the subject. What is your approach to this? How do you take information and formulate a point around it? Is that a learned process or natural? Um, I That's a tough question because I certainly was formally trained in persuasion by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Every week we had a school called the Theocratic Ministry School, and it was a big part of public speaking. And there was 60 different points, like repetition for emphasis and voice modulation and theme and using an outline and extemporaneous like I could get the Theocratic Ministry School guidebook out and go through all the different, but it was a pretty comprehensive course on public speaking and persuasion. And I started it when I was 6 years old. My first public speaking was on a platform in front of about 150 people in Mooresville, Indiana, and I was 6, maybe 7 years old when I did it. And I was nervous. I cried the whole way to the meeting. I didn't want to do it. I tried to get my mom to let me get out of it at the last minute, and no. And the only thing that kind of direct, because I remember 2 or 3 kids did fucking have a meltdown on the stage in their first few, and I'm like, I was bound and determined, like, I am not going to fucking cry in front of these 150 people. So I just, like, as a 7-year-old, I gutted it out, man. But I don't know. I mean, I think that so there's one, I got a huge advantage that part of my brainwashing was effective public speaking. The second thing is, to effectively teach or persuade someone, you have to understand the topic at a high degree, which is one of the reasons I've shied away from a lot of political commentary, because I'm kind of new to a lot of this stuff too. Like, I came like 12 years ago, I was essentially Republican. And my vote, like I mentioned, like, I actually disobeyed church doctrine to vote for Bush in 2004. I voted for McCain in 2008. So I don't feel like I know some of this stuff well enough to teach it. I'm getting closer to that, and also I feel like there's a lot of people online to do that job better. Like, if you go to YouTube, ContraPoints, anything I'd have to say about like current politics and stuff like that, like, she does such a better job of doing it. I don't know. I guess, like I said, the key to like being persuasive is knowing your shit, and not just knowing it, because I see a lot of people that know things but they never look at the other side's arguments, and it's very I'm reminded of like what Christopher Hitchens said about Sean Hannity, like in the middle of a debate on his show. He was like, I've come to the depressing conclusion that you are a person who is entirely unfamiliar with the arguments against your position. And I feel like that's another key. Like, anytime you're going to go across and try to persuade someone, you better have a good working argument. You better understand how they think and how they look and the things that are important to them, and also have enough, arguments and counter arguments so you can anticipate some of that stuff. And it's because that's the other thing, is it makes it impossible to appeal to like multiple audiences. Like, there's no way, it's very hard to say something that would appeal to like everyone and every, so you also have to pick your audience you're going to talk to. Like, I'm going to, because a lot of times I found that I've offended women when I'm like, I'm just going to talk to the straight white men in my audience, who are the majority and who I think need to hear these things, and I want to put it to them in terms that I think they will understand and not be offended, and not be like, well, A.Ron's just running out of the blah, 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 so he was social justice warrior bullshit. And a lot of times I have to use terminology and I have to use analogies and stuff that are offensive to someone who's quote unquote woke. But, them's the breaks. Like, my choice was to talk to that other particular audience because the other audience doesn't need my help, So you have to decide who you're talking to, what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to defeat them? Are you trying to influence them? Are you trying to change their mind? Like, I just had this conversation with Anthony last night. We're talking about a particular point that we wanted to make at this chapter. And I said, you have to decide whether you want to preach to the choir, whether you want to persuade someone who is like wavering on the edge, whether you want to be the person who first forms who busts a crack in someone's mental armor, or do you want to be, like, because you can't do all three. And so, yeah, I think I felt like that's a pretty good answer, right? If not nothing else, it was 34 34 years worth of training and persuasion to win into it. Jesus Christ. Um, that's the other thing. These solo podcasts, when people are talking about, like, I feel like sometimes I can be such a fucking blowhard. Man, I swear. I apologize. Without Jim in the room, it gets scary sometimes. RKC Ralph. Would you consider plans for an Expanse Season 1 rewatch in light of the improved ratings for the show and the move to Amazon? Absolutely. I don't know what Jim thinks about it. We've talked about it, and I think we're both amenable to the idea, especially if the show kind of blows up. I'm not sure if it'd be something we do before Season 4 or something we do like after Season 4, and because I think there's going to be at least 5, probably 6, maybe up to 9 seasons of this thing. So I'm not in a super hurry to do it, but yes, because I think Season 1 was a lot better than I thought now that I'm familiar with the show. And I think going back, and it's just like you watch The Wire and it's amazing, and you go back and watch it again and it's even more amazing. Because, like, holy shit, look at all this track that they laid in Season 1 that you had no idea. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in doing something like that. Drink time. Let me mark another edit on the track. Let me cough a little bit. I can actually mute it this time. Okay. Corey from New Scotland. Astronauts are cool. Isn't it about time we had a serious show about astronauts? I really love the beginning of the original Planet of the Apes movie when they first land on the planet. It's rocky and barren, but they land on water, find a single planet first, then scarecrows, and an ominous feeling of threat. I love to see a serious take on astronauts reaching and exploring another planet, but I have major doubts it would be interesting enough without the proper conflict or threat. Kind of how The Walking Dead rarely gets into farming or general rebuilding of society in favor of zombies. Corey, you need to watch The Expanse, because The Expanse is essentially astronauts in space doing cool things and making some first, like, realistic first contact with unfathomable alien forces. I think you dig it. So you should check it out. Russ Kelly from Indy. You're talking Twitch numbers in the forums, and you said you average around 40 or so viewers, and that was a little low for your audience, and you want to start doing IRLs. I think those numbers are pretty great considering it's just a few hours a week, and you guys just started a few months ago. Maybe there's some inside baseball stuff I don't understand, but it seems like you guys are killing it on Twitch. I mean, honestly, if we were starting from nothing, getting to 40 viewers would be fucking amazing. But if you have, like, an audience of 50-some thousand people that you're saying, hey, we're doing this thing, and less than 1% of them turn out to even look at it and give it a chance, like, that I guess that's why I'm saying it's not as disappointing. It's just, anytime we get stuff like this, anytime we get stuff with, like, low-rated shows or whatever, we always think, what could we be doing with this time? Because we have a very limited amount of time that we can spend, right? So what is the best value for our labor, right? How can we reach the most? And it's like, it's not like we're choosing between things we would like to do and things that we don't want to do, but we know would be popular. It's more like, look at all these things that are good and look at all these things that are popular. Which are the things that we can get into, and which are the things that our audience would respond to? So when we see, like, response rates so low, part of that is, like, I think Twitch is, the older you are, the less inclined you are to get into it, and our audience demographically tends to be Gen Xers and older. And like, Twitch is a platform for, like, 30-year-olds and less. Like, I think if you look at the demographics, there's a lot of kids and teenagers on that platform. So, like, I think there's a lot of people that, like, had never been in Twitch until we started watching it. But I don't know, like, I like Twitch, I like its potential, but it is when I do it, it's fun. But when I also have been doing it, I've been realizing, like, hey, like, what if we spent, like, those 5 or 6 hours a week doing some other thing that we could be doing? Would that be better? I don't know. Those are the questions that bedevil us here at Bald Move. Adobo 1148. Have you seen a Better Call Saul season 4 trailer? I have not. Between Esmail and Nolan Joy, who frustrates you the most as a podcaster? I would say that Mr. Robot Season 2 and Westworld Season 2 were equally frustrating, but Westworld was better looking and better cast, so it was probably Sam Esmail. But they both do things like Sam Esmail is that the top dab shit, right? The completely unrealistic economics to show forces on me. And Westworld, it's their view of humanity I just don't subscribe to. It's borderline offensive to me. So like both of them have critical, I think, flaws in the worlds they're trying to build that do not reflect the world as I see it and know it. So they're both kind of annoying in that area. Captain Trips, any update on your Pixel issues? I love the phone since I got it, but the battery drain issues have suddenly become a thing. Have you any plans to switch? Yeah, I actually meant to do this at the top. I want to get rid of my Pixel. I've had it for almost 2 years now. I have to charge the battery 2 to 3 times a day just to keep it topped off. It's fucking ridiculous. I've wiped the phone. I've started from a factory rebuild. I don't know what the hell they've done to it, but it used to be a near perfect phone, and now it's a piece of shit that I can't count on to get through the day. So I would like to ask the Bald Move community, what should I move to? I kind of want to move. A battery is the primal. Like I have to get at least 18 hours out of a battery with pretty heavy use. And I don't really care about anything else. I don't really want to get into iPhones because I've never have. I don't have any part of my digital footprint in the Apple ecosystem. It's not like I'm unwilling to. It's more just the same reason Jim doesn't want to try Android. He's got all this shit in the App Store and everything's kind of like tied into that. So like I guess I'd look for something. I want it to be like a generic Android device that doesn't have a bunch of bloatware on it, that has a very good battery and a decent camera. Because all I use my phone for is listening to podcasts, texting, and web and essentially web browsing. Like I don't play any games. I listen to podcasts. Is the other thing. I don't do anything exotic. I use Google Docs. I use the podcast app. I use email. You know, it's essentially core Google apps. I don't do a lot of weird shit with it. So I don't need a lot of like really, I don't need to be very powerful. I don't watch a lot of video on it. What would be like, is there some kind of weird Korean vanilla $200 Android phone that's like the best and nobody knows about it? Like I would love to see some suggestions in the forums or tweet them at me if you want to. Lucas P. How do you deal with being in the rut in terms of creative work? I'm a musician and currently feel kind of stagnant in what I'm producing. Well, it's a great question. I've come to appreciate that you can force creativity, that you can force yourself to do something out of the box, and it doesn't feel right, but if you keep forcing yourself to do something different. So like I don't like you're a musician and you have a favorite form of music. Maybe you should find something that's completely different. Like if you like, you know, rock, try jazz. If you like to try to do some of that fancy Spanish plucking shit. Like do something that's completely outside your wheelhouse, and you will find that expanding those techniques give you additional palettes that might you know, find a new creative outlet. It's the same reason I'm trying to get into video editing, right? I feel a little bit creatively stagnant right now, and it was a lot of stress and a lot of work to do, even a modest thing like that Kickstarter video, but it was a lot of fun, and now I want to see if I can take it a little bit further. But I also think that would help out Bald Move if we had some more like slightly fancier production quality on some of our video stuff. So try to force something in a different medium, in a different style. Like it's one of the things I used to do. It's like I was bored drawing, so I picked up inks. I was bored inks, I picked up watercolors. I was bored with watercolors, I picked up oil painting. And then like when I was bored with all that, I tried digital. Like try to do different techniques and different mediums in the art form that you're doing, and see if that doesn't spark your creative juices. Corey from New Scotland, do you think a North American Union would be a positive thing? What kind of basic structure would you use? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Are you talking about like adding Mexico and Canada? I mean, honestly, in 200 years, I think that we will have one world government. Um, because that reflects the actual reality of the world we live in. We don't live in a world with borders. And there's a lot of hue and cry over culture and this being better and that being worse. But you know, any scientist will tell you that every human being is essentially just like every other human being in terms of our basic genetics and the way we approach life and our operating temperatures and all that shit is pretty much the same. So the quicker we get to a situation where we're not fighting over each individual part of this planet, we're working together collectively and pooling our best and brightest towards all of our mutual endeavors, is the way to go. And I think the European Union is a great step towards that. It would be like, I think that's eventually going to happen. The continents are all going to kind of like, you know, partner up, right? And then they will they'll slowly form the idea of nations and nationalism will eventually break down, and we will on some glorious day be one people. But I don't, yeah, I can't extemporaneously talk about something like that. I don't even know exactly what you're talking about. I don't care to talk about Jordan Peterson. I feel like I've said enough about him for now. I'll check him out in another couple months and see if he's saying something, or moderating his views. I don't know. I don't know anything about your home province, Corey, Nova Scotia. I think you got a lot of coastline and a lot of islands, so that'd be cool to explore in my sailboat one of these days. Wait a second. Where's Nova Scotia? Nova Scotia. Is that on the east or west coast of Canada? It's on the east coast. All right. So, one of my sailing fantasies is to do... Yeah, that would work out nice. One of my sailing fantasies is to do what they call the Great Loop, which you start in the Great Lakes. You go through a network of rivers and canals that get onto the Mississippi River. You sail to the Gulf of Mexico, and you circumnavigate Florida. You sail all the way up the east coast of the United States. You sail past Nova Scotia into, what is this? The St. Lawrence River. And you use the lock systems there to get back to the Great Lakes. And Bob's your uncle, you're back where you started. That's called the Great Circle. So it's a very good chance in the next decade I will be getting a good view of the ports and the coast of Nova Scotia. Yeah, it does look at all these freaking islands, man. I think that's the coolest thing about sailing, like going to these different deserted islands and just taking them over. Like, no, it's just the coolest thing in the world. And there's like now, like there's in what is this, Lake Erie, there's like this Put-in Bay and Bass Island and Pele Island. There's like so many islands to explore without even having to get your boat salty. But yeah, I'd say in the next decade I'm probably going to get a good view of Nova Scotia, maybe the next 2 decades. Let's see, Danielle M. I'm a child of divorced parents, and my mom remarried when I was 6 to be my stepdad. Even though, to my stepdad. Okay, I was like, well, okay, but that's something that could happen in the 21st century. But I was trying to process it. Your mom remarried when I was 6 to your stepdad. Even though everything worked out well, my mom admitted to being nervous to date again with 2 young children. She didn't even tell my future stepfather about my sister and I until 3 months after they'd been dating. My question is, how did you approach dating while also having a child? How important was this potential significant other's relationship with Jack? Oh yeah, I did the same thing, man. I didn't. None of the women that I was dating ever met Jack unless I thought that we might get married, or that we were going to move into each other. And so as a consequence, I think Cecily's the only one that actually got to know Jack. Like, I think there was a woman or two that might have met him like at an event or something. Like if I take him to try, but Jack certainly didn't know that this was a woman that my dad was dating, et cetera, et cetera. And I think because like I read a lot of books about divorce, and one of the things that came through loud and clear was you really don't want to get a revolving door of potential mommies in front of a 3-year-old, because that's very confusing to them, and it doesn't give them a good amount of stability. So make sure you know that the relationship is going to be serious before you get involved. And I thought that was good advice. So I didn't hide the fact that I had kids. That was on my dating profile, but you know, it's certainly like there's a woman, one woman I dated, and when I went to go see her for the first time, like she invited me in and her kids were all there. And she's like, "Oh, meet Uncle so and so," and I'm just like, it just felt really gross and weird, and it didn't work out. So I feel like, and it must be a lot tougher on probably women, especially if they got like a deadbeat dad. It's kind of just left, you know, it must be a lot harder to do that, but I think it's worth the effort if you can keep that separate until you know it's going to be something serious, and that these are good people that you can trust to be in your children's lives. Let's see. What the fuck, Michelle? I'm on a layover in Charlotte, North Carolina, was watching lunch while walking my gate, and I got recognized. I was on a moving walkway, and the guy behind me at a crazy busy airport tells his girlfriend the girl in front of me is watching A.Ron. What? What? That is wild. I've I've been recognized a couple times in public, but I've never been meta recognized. That's super awesome. uh let's see. Hatorian, what's the chance the leftovers poster you got was from Carrie Coon as a thank you for a Baldy win, or did you guys figure out who sent it to you? I don't think anyone stepped forward to claim it. But then again, I was on vacation last week, and I probably need to go through my email to make sure because like once a month I go through my email to make sure that I haven't missed anything that I want to respond to, because things get crazy and I have to kind of get things, especially in the middle of show seasons, and I have to get organized. But it'd be super cool if it's Carrie Coon, obviously. But it's, you know, if anyone sent it to me, it'd be super cool. So Damon Lindelof, whatever. And I think that's lunch, everybody. My voice is about to give out. Had a solid 90-minute solo lunch experience. Jim will be back next week. We will have our first thoughts on the Sharp Objects. That will be on the Bald. That's not going to be on its own feed since it's a mini series. We're just going to put it in the Bald Move TV feed. So if you're already subscribed to that, you're good to go. If you're in one of Fire Hose feeds, we'll have full coverage of that probably Tuesday. And then again, the Game of Thrones podcast. We're starting up season 3 next week, and that will probably be a Thursday afternoon release, is what I think it will be on the schedule. So thanks for everybody for stopping by. Thanks for everybody for listening. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.